Hello, everyone. Happy New Year, and welcome to our first episode of 2023 for Environmental Justice Now. My name is Kadeska Bray, and I am the Energy Justice Organizer, as well as the Communicating Our Power Fellow at Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. Before we get started today, I'd like to do a brief land acknowledgement. While we are on a video call and many of us are joining from different places, we want to remind ourselves that we are gathered on the unceded land of the indigenous peoples. I'm joining in from so-called Richmond, Virginia, and I'm currently located on the land of the Powhatan and the Chickahominy peoples. And if you're unsure of whose land you are on and you want to learn, you can visit native-ca to find out. And that website should also be on your screen. This week's Environmental Justice Now will discuss energy justice and clean energy bills during the upcoming 2023 General Assembly session, which starts next week. And we're going to talk about how we're advocating for energy affordability for all of Virginians. And joining us in this discussion is Diana Williams, the Communications Manager at Clean Virginia. Thank you so much, Diana, for being here today. How are you? How's your new year?
I'm good. Thank you for having me and Happy New Year. So far, so good. We're only 6 days in, but thumbs up. It's going well.
That's great. That's great. And so before we begin talking about energy affordability, I would like to give our supporters a quick breakdown of the issue. VIPL consistently talks about the energy burden issue that many Virginians face and what we're doing for energy justice. But a quick reminder for a lot of folks out there that Virginia faces some of the highest electricity bills in the South. In Virginia, 164,000 households that are living below poverty level pay about 31% of their income on energy costs. And another 79,000 pay about 17% of their income, far exceeding the 6% threshold considered to be non-burdensome. So in an ideal situation, a lot of our families will be paying 6% or less of their income towards energy costs. However, we're seeing percentages as high as 31 and 17. And so many of our neighbors most impacted by high energy costs are also from the same communities that are facing environmental justice issues. So it's a lot of communities of color and low-income families facing energy burden. So it's very unreasonable for working families to spend much of their income to afford essential services like energy. And it is crucial to ensure resilience for families that are financially burdened by utility bills in times of crisis. And so it is unjust it's very much so unjust for us to pass this issue as a side. And so what we've done is try to advocate for a lot of the common sense and fair legislation that will tackle this issue. And Diana, do you want to add more about a couple of the issues that I've talked about in terms of energy burden and add on to what you think is exacerbating the issue of energy and affordability in Virginia?
Sure. And you had mentioned low income communities. So I think I'll start there because I live in Waynesboro, Virginia. Which, by the way, I know in your introduction, you had talked about the land that you occupy that was once indigenous land. I work in Charlottesville. I live in Waynesboro. Both are located on land that was once Monacan. So I think that, going back though to what you were saying about low-income communities. Waynesboro is a low-income community. We have approximately 20% of our residents are living at or below the poverty level, the federal poverty level. And then we have almost another 30% that are living with at the ALICE level. And so for those who aren't familiar with the acronym, I won't break that down for you. It's just important to remember these are the people that are usually referred to as the working poor. They're those who are like one paycheck away from a disaster. And so in a community like that, having affordable energy is crucial because, first of all, this isn't a luxury. Like, I have to have electricity in my home. And so to have a need put you in a situation where if I'm a low income family, I might have to decide between paying my electric bill or paying all of my rent or skipping, my medication this month. That is like not only an unfair position to be in, but it's also an unsustainable and untenable one. So I think that's really what's important about when we're looking at low income communities, and also thinking about too that if you are having difficulty in paying your utility bill, that's often seen as an economic indicator for a future eviction. And we know that Virginia has really high eviction rates. In fact, your organization has done a lot to shine a spotlight on the connection between energy burden and evictions. So I think that's something else that needs to be a part of the conversation, because what we don't want, especially coming off of a pandemic that we're not fully out of, what we don't want are people having trouble paying for their power who could also face an eviction. We don't really need that. So I think addressing one will help to address others. And I think affordable energy really needs to be looked at as like as a right, and not something that's optional. It should be a right.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And that was the point I was, trying to make by saying this is an essential service, right?
Mhm.
And the fact of the matter is that energy decides whether or not you can get online and then be able to access, your job if you are remote, and be able to enjoy a basic, you know, uh, luxury of living dignified life depends on you being able to afford a home and being able to keep lights on in that home. And so, what are energy justice and clean energy advocates, especially our coalition with the Energy Burden Coalition, and folks like Clean Virginia, doing to help remedy this issue? I know Clean Virginia is spearheading the rate adjustment clause reform in this upcoming session. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I think that, well, in general, we are always in support of the bills that will move us towards, like all Virginians, towards a carbon-free future with affordable renewable energy. And so a lot of what we end up supporting, whether like we're like spearheading something or whether we're just putting our full, voice and support behind it, those things are leading us towards that future that all Virginians need. And so in that vein, with we're looking at rates, and this is one of the things that can kind of be it's the weird wonky part of like energy policy that a lot of people don't necessarily understand. But I think the simplest way to understand it is that you have a base rate, like that's what you pay per kilowatt hour for your electricity. But there are all these additional charges that have been padded in. And so when we're looking at our utility monopolies, and the two big ones for Virginia are Dominion Energy, which about 2/3 of Virginia have Dominion, and then Appalachian Power Company, which is mostly serving Southwest Virginia going into like Tennessee. When you look at the two of them, the exchange that we're supposed to get for having a monopoly, like giving them territory where they have no challenges, is that we get affordable rates, but we're not seeing that. And so looking at the rates specifically is one way that we can start to address this and start to return power to the customers, like let them have more control over the cost of their bill so they can actually understand what goes into the cost of their bill, and exercise some more control over that, has some say into how, like, construction projects, for one thing, how they actually come together, because that is going into the bill. I don't think people always realize that we're still paying for projects whether they fail or not. Like, we still have to foot the bill for that. And I think more people should understand that, so that when you look at your bill, it shouldn't be weird and wonky. You should be able to look at it and say, oh, this is exactly how much I used this month, and this is how much it's going to cost me.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of the bills that we're talking about have been a long time fights, and then they deal with the fact that a lot of our utility companies are monopolies, right? They're able to cover large parts of the state and offer as high rates as they're able, as they want to, as they are able to under our state corporation commission. And so a lot of these bills that we'll be talking about will be able to really change the laws that allow monopolies to keep making profits off of everyday hardworking folks, and not really offer any type of, I guess, grace and solution for the high energy bills that a lot of our families are facing. And that also will look like one of the bills that we've always talked about on the Environmental Justice Now show is trying to pass a utility shutoff protections. This year, VIPL, as well as Appalachian Voices and Clean Virginia and Virginia Organizing, and a lot of our clean energy and energy burden partners are working to pass a bill that will instate a utility shutoff protections during states of emergency and extreme weathers. This bill will allow for electric, gas, and water utilities is beyond just energy, and it does include water, to make sure that they're not disconnecting customers from these essential services during extreme weather events and states of emergency. And so they will be able to limit the ability of these utilities to not disconnect customers also during periods of very hot or very cold temperatures, as well as extreme weather events and weather warnings. And this is so that because we recognize that because a lot of Virginians are facing high energy bills and they're not able to afford it at moments that are very crucial, whether it be extreme weather events or a state of emergency like COVID, we have to protect those folks that are, losing these services because of non-payment, because they're unable to pay. And that also deals with the fact that, like Diana was mentioning, that our monopolies set high rates. So these folks are not able to pay these bills anyway. However, it gets exacerbated during the coldest and the hottest months when folks are in dire situations to be able to survive these type of extreme events. And I know we also have other two bills that we're supporting, and that those are the Affordable Energy Act, as well as the Shared Solar Minimum Bill. The Affordable Energy Act will be able to basically, it's also another rate, it addresses it will hold our electric monopolies accountable from overcharging customers. So it also deals with it's like another rate bill. So this act would restore regulators' authority, as in the State Corporation Commission's authority to order rate cuts when electric monopolies are overcharging customers. Like I said, our monopolies tend to set their own rate, and they've been able to do so because this legislation hasn't been passed, and there isn't any protection in place so that our monopolies are not overcharging us. However, this bill will be able to fill in that gap and make sure that our SCC, our State Corporation Commission, which regulates our monopolies, can have that authority to order rate cuts that will make sure that our rates are at a stable way, and they're at an affordable rate that our low-income families can actually afford. And then we have a shared solar minimum bill that will also allow us to make sure that Dominion's shared solar program is not overcharging customers for just the monthly minimum bill, and we're trying to cut it down by a big amount. And the IPL is in support of these two bills. We haven't been leading the effort in these two bills, but we are watching them, and we'll be able to continuously support them as they move through the session, just like I'm sure Clean Virginia will as well. And so I think those are the main points that we wanted to get across. And before I jump into sharing how to keep up with us throughout the session, Diana, do you have anything to add about this issue, or why you think these bills are important, or any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think you touched on all of the main points. I think if I were to add anything, it would just be, circling back to the idea of overcharges and the importance of restoring authority to the SEC. We've seen in past years where the SEC has said, hey, we think you owe your customers refunds, or said, hey, you charge too much. Like, Dominion alone has overcharged its customers by $1.9 billion since 2009. That's a whole lot of extra money. And the SEC has like made attempts, or at least had said, hey, we don't think this is what you're supposed to be doing, but their hands have been tied by legislation. So giving them the authority to do what they're supposed to be able to do will go a long way in reducing customer bills overall. And I also think too that, again, going back to like where I live and what I see, going through any type of utility shutoff is a huge disruption to your life, and being cut off from services that are critical to like not even like maintaining just like a relatively decent lifestyle. Like if I'm on like a CPAP machine and I get home dialysis or something like that, and somebody turns my electricity off, this is a matter of life and death. We're not just talking about power outages or, extreme heat during the summer where we might actually have like rolling brownouts. We're just talking about like, I'm minding my business, but I'm struggling right now, and you turn my power off, and now I'm like in a life or death situation. So I think those are like really it's really key legislation that I feel like is something that, when we talk about like Virginians, even outside, like even if I don't have Dominion or APCO, these are all important protections that Virginians need. So I really, especially as representing Clean Virginia, I'm just really proud that we are bringing this legislation forward, or supporting those who are championing this legislation, and just, using what platform we have to say, hey, this is a good idea. This needs to happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, we can only do this in coalition, right? We love our Energy Burden Coalition. And, it's a bigger issue, you know, because a lot of our monopolies are also responsible for a lot of climate disruption and pollution. So there's a lot of connections here that we can make, from communities that are suffering from these disruptions to the same communities that are facing the high energy burdens, and that the double-sidedness of this issue. But for today, we're going to just focus on these bills and talk about the upcoming session. And I'm going to share a couple of resources for you all to follow up, and events that you can attend to understand these bills more, but also to lobby as a Virginian and show that you care about energy justice, energy burden, and making sure that energy is affordable for all. The first resource I'm going to share is our VIPL GA 2023 webpage. We have a landing page where we'll be continuously updating it starting next week. It will have all of the events that are coming up, as well as a lot of our action opportunities, one-pagers, and fact sheets on a lot of these bills will be shared up there. And then we also have a GA 2023 call where we're meeting every Monday starting the 16th, MLK Day, where we'll talk about what has happened during that week of that session, the past week of the session, and really making sure that our faith communities, or any person of value and faith that cares about protecting our progress, our climate justice progress, to make sure that you're in the loop for the actions that are coming up, and who to talk to about these bills. And then I'm also going to shout out our Energy Burden Coalition 2023 Day of Action. Please show out on January 26th. We'll be starting bright and early with breakfast. We'll be at the Centrist Building, making sure that you're able to hear from experts about these issues, as well as get all the fact sheets that you need to talk to your legislators on that same day. So those are a couple of things that we have coming up. There's a lot more. I'm just sharing a couple, but please stay in touch and join VIPL and contact Clean Virginia if you are interested in uplifting energy affordability this upcoming session. I think that's all I have for today. Diana, I'm going to give you the floor just one more time, and also say thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me. This has been a pleasure, and definitely a change of pace for Friday. So I appreciate the opportunity. I just think, just as in closing, and to again circle back to something that you've already done a great job in highlighting, is that alleviating energy burden is something that it will actually have a benefit for all Virginians. Like some of these things, while we're thinking about like protecting our most vulnerable, or thinking about those who again can be one paycheck from a complete disaster, including finding themselves unhoused, I think it's important to also think about too that lower bills are lower bills. Like it's not just going to go to one segment of the poor population, right? So if we can lower bills, that's a good thing for everyone. And so and thank you for the work that you've done in like making this, especially any energy burden, a topic of conversation and something that people understand, so they understand when it's time for them to advocate for themselves and others, they know exactly what they're advocating for.
Absolutely. That's what we're hoping to do. And thanks for helping us do that on the show today, Diana. And you have a very great weekend. And thanks,
Okay.
everybody, for joining.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.